What do you think of our new digs?
I like it. It's been a while since we've been in studio together doing a podcast. So that's, the extra basis thing has taken the Zoom route for what, 3 years?
Yeah.
Now?
Yeah.
It's taken the backseat to something called, what was that? The World Series?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm still working on you really should be on the other side. Whoop. You should be over on that side.
Where my computer's at?
Yeah, but I'm working on that because this is kind of a peel back the curtain and let people know that this is a work in progress as we're trying to figure out this new setup. We got these beautiful blue walls, which change colors, by the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice that they did this. We haven't had this before.
No.
I like the Sports Extra studio too, though.
Mm-hmm.
That was good.
Yeah. You know what? Here's another thing we haven't had either. I don't think we've ever had a general manager win a World Series and then potentially be out of a job.
Well, he's at the GM meetings,
right working now, without a contract,
which is, thank you to James Click. The Astros owe him a thanks for that. I don't know that I would be doing that, but he is doing it. Good for him.
Do you think he could be out there looking for jobs? You're banging the table. Don't bang the table.
I don't know. I don't know if he's out there looking for jobs. I know that. I know that it's common knowledge in the game that he's got a 1-day contract or 1 year, offer.
Yeah.
I think that's common knowledge. I think if I'm a general manager and I've won a World Series and all of a sudden now I got a 1 year offer, I'm asking questions, and maybe they're not always of the organization I'm with. Maybe it's of myself, maybe it's of my family, maybe it's of my future aspirations. I don't know, but I don't think that I'm going to be happy with a 1 year contract if I'm a GM that won a World Series. Now,
especially one, Jeremy, that is missing 2 high-ranking officials. Ocampo left to go be an assistant general manager with the Marlins. Pete Patella left to become the general manager of the San Francisco Giants. How are you going to hire somebody to fill one of those 2 spots, both of those 2 spots? Those people are going to ask when they go through the interview process, well, what's your status? Are you going to be here after next year? I just don't see how that's going to work.
I agree with you 100%. I can say this about the people they have in this organization, and it's going to be very foreign. What's going to happen right now because I'm going to speak my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I'm struggling with that.
Yeah,
it's a new thing.
Yeah.
What I can say is
new room, new philosophy from Jeremy.
What I can say is there are some very, very, very bitter people in that organization still, because the performance in past drafts has not been great. Like I can't believe some of the, in the middle of winning a World Series, some of the bitterness that I saw with some of these guys was like you just got a ring. Like, what do you? It's some of these guys are very self-serving. Now, I'm not saying Jim Crane's that way. Jim Crane's going to run his organization the way he sees fit, and Dusty's Dusty. And I don't even think James Click is self-serving. Matter of fact, I think James Click was so loyal to the people around him, the people that were there already, instead of putting his stamp, and by that I mean a diverse stamp. I'm not talking about Sarah Goodrum, who was really ineffective in comparison to Pete Patilla. I'm not talking about Andrew Ball, or what was the other assistant GM he brought in?
Powers?
Yeah, Scott Powers, right? Or is it Austin Powers? It was Scott Powers. Anyway, Andrew Ball and Scott Powers, and I'm not talking about them. They just got here.
Yep.
I'm talking about his ability to get beyond the people that he had that are just like him, that had a chance to have some impact. And so what you're left with is guys that were there before you who maybe had some allegiance to the other organization, the other GM, and don't like being necessarily called on the performance. Now, Ocampo did a better job with the Latin American scouting than I think anybody has given him credit for at all until probably now.
Yeah, I would say up until the World Series. I mean, we've been singing his praises. I know locally in the newspaper they've done that as well. But I said last year, and even in 2020, actually 2020 is when I said it. I said, without the international signings, this team would be toast.
You did, and it was on the heels of Urquidy, who had the great game in Washington. But now, you've got a situation where Oz came back for a year and left. And he's assistant GM in Miami. You got a situation where Pete Patilla is the GM in San Francisco. That was still puzzling to me, but I'm happy for him.
Okay.
But he's a GM in San Francisco.
There's only 30 of those jobs.
Good for him. When it comes to what James Click is doing and what Jim Crane likely wants, it's got to be to rebuild the system. It's got to be to get aggressive in Latin America because you've seen what's going on now, and it's got to be to refocus player development. He can't be happy with some of the stuff that's going on. Now, look, some of the guys that are still in their position, they're going to be nameless because it's irrelevant of the names, but they're just hanging on. They're just celebrating with the fact the big league club's doing it and taking the success. And at every level, you may have a piece of it, but the big league club did what they did. You had nothing to do with it. You may have helped the players get there, sure, but you had nothing to do with what the big league club did. You didn't have anything, Jason. I had nothing to do with it. Dusty Baker, James Click, and anybody else who's involved with the big league club every single day. And I'm not talking about hanging around in the postseason and taking pictures with champagne. I'm talking about guys that are in the clubhouse day in and day out. The Jason Kanslers, the Troy Snitkers, the Gary Pettises, the Alex Centrones. What's the pitching coach's name? The one who plays Strom again? Miller?
Josh Miller.
Josh Miller. You're talking about Dusty. I mean, that's the guys that had something to do with this, right? James Click in his front office for sure had something to do with it. Scouting department had a role, development had a role, but it can be better. And Pete Patilla's job was overseeing scouting and development. If they got there where they are when scouting and development, regardless of what's happening in the World Series right now, maybe James needs to expand his horizons a little bit and reestablish that. And I'm not telling him what to do because the man just won a World Series. I am saying perhaps that'll help smooth things over to get him more of a contract instead of relying on some of the bitter people that are there just trying to survive.
What we've been seeing and reading is this idea of philosophical differences. And you've said previously on this podcast and on Sports Extra, perhaps James needs to turn to some more baseball people in terms of people with a little more feel, because the world is not black and white and not numbers. And I'm not saying James is like that, but a number of people in the game sometimes who are very analytical, they tend to look at things black and white. Is that easier said than done to find? No, listen, I look at your organization, how many people that have had different types of backgrounds, scouting, player development, who also played, who also have that idea of feel and that players aren't machines. So I've got to believe that there are people out there that he could find, but the fact that he's only been in one organization, does that hurt him, do you think?
You ask some pretty good questions sometimes. I don't know if you ever practiced it or ever told you that, but I would say that the one organization only hurts if you don't listen to the people that elsewhere or the people that are in that organization that have networks. I don't know that he did that because I watched Andrew Ball and Scott Powers walk in, and I told you then. And look, I got to say this I actually really like James Click.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do. I think he's got some vision. I think he's got some intelligence. I think he's a really smart guy. And I think he's always open to hearing new ideas. We saw that firsthand. No matter how we saw it, we saw it.
Yeah.
Okay? And he's a man, 1-year contract to me, all due respect to Jim Crane, it's like Dusty in the pitching. Like, I'll defer to the guys in the seat. But it doesn't make sense to me unless you really want to make a change.
Listen, a 1-year contract is basically the tea leaves of, we appreciate your service here, but it's time for you to move on. Deuces.
Well, I'll tell you what else it signifies. You have the last two GMs here in Jeff Luhnow and James Click are decidedly analytically inclined. Fair?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If this guy won a World Series and he's let go, and I'll get to what I really think my reasons are for that in a second, or he can't get an extension that matches winning the World Series, where guys get 5 years. This guy can't get 3, 5 years. That means there's a disconnect between him and Crane that no one wants to talk about. And you know what? Good for them. Like, they shouldn't be talking about it. But the disconnect is there. And if you're an analytical guy like a David Stearns, who really, God, if I cared about popularity, I wouldn't say what I'm about to say. David Stearns hadn't done anything in Milwaukee. Did I miss the parades there too?
Well, they've made playoffs. They've had playoff
Did they win a World
appearances.
Series?
No.
Okay.
But Jeremy, only one team wins a World Series each year.
Did they go to a World Series?
Not that I can recall.
He's been there since 2015. And I remember being there since 2015 because there were other guys that he got put on top of that had helped build the system, starting with Jack Sorensic, who was obviously in Seattle at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Side had been a scouting director. He passed away. Ray Montgomery was there. Player development was going a certain direction, was doing great. And the Brewers teams that he's just made his, the last 6 years on or 7 years were already there. If you find the guys that he's drafted, got to the big leagues, he's had a hand in, yeah, he's made some good moves, like Yelich was a good trade. And, we brought some coaches in that knew what they were doing, like Darnell Coles and Derek Johnson. And then we got rid of those guys for guys like Andy Haynes and some other guys have no clue what they're teaching. And, when you watch something like that and you talk about David Stearns coming in, my point is this: an analytical GM is going to stay as far away from this place as possible. And I would too. If you're 35, 40 years old, all right, and you're an up-and-coming analytical GM, which, by the way, there's a million of those dudes now, right? And you're one of those guys. And the guy that won a World Series got a 1-year contract and was let go. I want nothing to do with Houston. I'm not, if I'm one of those guys. Now, if I'm a baseball guy, I'm going, or somebody in the middle. And here is the biggest reason why. Besides you, do you think anybody listening out there in podcast, extra base, KHOU land has any clue who Jim Crane's inner circle really is? Would you like me to tell you?
Go ahead.
All right. You got Mr. October, Reggie Jackson.
I've seen him.
Who left the New York Yankees because of the way they were going, which that hasn't worked out either, right? But if you think of Reggie Jackson, does anybody in the room think Astros? I don't. How about Angels? You think them? A's, Orioles? He made a stop, but where do you think of Reggie? He's a Yankee. And Reggie and a Yankee. Reggie's here. Okay. Hall of Famer, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
You got Craig Biggio.
Yep.
Smart guy. Got a kid in the big leagues. Definitely a numbers guy at the same time. Didn't play that way. Hall of Famer. You got Jeff Bagwell, who's also in the circle. Doesn't own anything besides the color black.
Not true. Not true.
For me.
Not true. I saw him at the parade and he had a white T-shirt on. Go ahead.
All right. So Jeff Bagwell, Hall of Famer, also in the circle. Jose Cruz Sr.
Enos Cabell. I think Enos Cabell's really in that circle.
Okay,
really
so
in that circle.
These guys, what's that, 5 names we mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
That are just old school baseball guys and old school in a good way, not old school like everything else sucks. Like they're open to this stuff, but old school in a good way. You have winners who don't want to see it all go one way. And then you have Dusty Baker, who is, regardless of the minor pitching hiccups that could have been major, that worked out in his favor this year, or at least got through it. Is 73.
Yep.
Turning 74.
Yep.
Been in the game 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
That analytics been around 20. And Billy Beane has said famously, my stuff works to get us to in regular season. Once it gets to playoffs, it's all luck. That's because it's strategy and field. That's what that is. Okay. That's because it's setting up consistent baseball. And when you see Dusty Baker able to veto a trade, at least one, it's the only one we know about, at least one, halfway through the year that the GM wants to make, bro, that never happens, okay? And Jim Crane said, Dusty don't want to do it. We ain't doing it. You know why? Because Biggio and Bagwell, you'll never get this. We don't know this for sure. But common sense says Biggio, Bagwell, Cabell, Cruz, you might even call Nolan Ryan. Say,
that's not. No, trust me. No, that did not happen.
What do you want to do? And they're like, not that. You know what I mean? So it's something where James has kind of been neutered here a little bit at different times because of the numbers, I think, and because of the people around him. I don't know if that would have happened last year. Happened this year.
You look at those Astros draft picks, and I hate to go back to what we always do, but man, last few years they've hit later on.
Which is what analytics do.
Because essentially they can run a bunch of numbers and say, oh, look at Chas McCormick, what he's doing against Division II. Go look at him. He's really overperforming, or he is really good at this one certain area. And that's something we should take a chance on.
You can't get everywhere as a scout. So the office should be looking at numbers and looking at stat sheets and places that you're not already going to see. And they should tell you who to go hit. It's a hit list. Now, you don't see those guys right away. You see them later. You can hide them down on the board. You may see them once. You may follow their numbers. You may go back and see them twice, but they're not heavily scouted games or events. They're just not going to happen. They're just, one-offs, right? So if you are able to pull that off, If you're able to do that, then a good analytics department will find the Chaz McCormicks. It'll find those guys.
David Hensley.
Yeah, what was the hitter for St. Louis? Right-hand hitter, left-hand hitter, Matt Adams.
Matt Adams, yeah, Slippery Rock University.
Right, so,
also, ironically, from the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference, which is the conference Chaz McCormick played in.
Right. So you look at guys like that, like the Braves and Gerald Turner and Evan Gaddis years and years ago. By the way, has been really quite interesting on Twitter recently.
Who? Wait, Gerald who?
Gerald Turner was a scout.
I got you now.
Who signed Evan Gaddis in
I got
23 or
yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
Round. And I'm quite certain that there was some statistical analysis to performance of what he was doing at the time, whether it was the analytics department or not. There was something going on. So Gerald scouted him, did what he had to do, put his name on him, and the rest is history. That's what analytics departments do. They need to stay out of the first, second, and third round. Just forget those rounds.
I disagree.
I don't, because you're focused on the wrong things. A guy like McCormick and his foot speed, his defensive, whatever metrics you're looking at there, which is way more than fielding percentage, his hard contact rates at that level, that's what you want to see. Now, you still want to evaluate that at the top of the draft. But when it comes to who's making the decision, analytics doesn't make the decision in the first round for me. No.
I'm not, but you should use them to help you make a decision.
Yeah, but in the back, I'm letting them make the pick. So if I'm in the 20th round, I'm listening. Like, what do you got? 15th, give me something. What do you have on paper that we like, that we identified, that we lined up here with that's what I want to hear from them. In the first round, it's like, I want to have that work done. Second round, third round, fourth round, and prepared. But my scouting department's making that decision.
So that's where we run into historic production from a guy like historic production from a guy like Seth Beer.
Instead of Noah Naylor. Right.
Yeah. Well, guess what? Noah Naylor. It's so funny now that we mention that, because now it's in some ways Noah Naylor, I don't want to say historic, but is with the production of a player who's much younger than everybody he plays against. Now that's not historic, but it's interesting about how you predicted it, but he's the guy that
the prophet.
Yeah, that's what one coach told me via Twitter or text rather, that you're the prophet, because everything Jeremy said during the World Series came true. We should run down those for those who don't follow us on Twitter. Okay. I mean, the big one was Lance McCullers should not pitch in Game 3. And your reasoning was because of a number of issues, mainly the weather, and granted, it was a little drier Game 3 than what was originally scheduled, but breaking ball dominant. And the big one is, who do you want coming back in Game 7? And guess what? You said pitch Christian Javier in Game 3, and then Christian Javier goes out and starts a combined no-hitter, which we were there to see. The first no-hitter at a World Series since 1956.
All of that, yes. Okay, all of that, yes. What I'll say about McCullers was this is where, look, some of this stuff worked out. McCullers didn't. But if you watch McCullers' history over the last several years, and even a week prior in New York, that weather, that feel of the baseball, mistake hitting lineup with his velocity doesn't work. You can't start him in that game. You need to start Javier and have McCullers behind him for a change of pace or change of look, give Lance a chance to pitch with some intent. The only way he was able to be successful against these guys in the Phillies when he did pitch that in Game 3 was what, third and fourth inning, and it was pitching with intent. Okay, by the time he got to the fifth inning, he was out of gas, and let him out there and let him, because he's a reliever now, he's not a starter. So that's just scouting. Dusty stayed loyal to his guy. They ended up losing the game. Javier goes Game 4. You said combined no-no, 5-0. Still think they had a slip up with Montero, with his rhythm and Presley, just too much on the page. Let Montero finish, save Presley for the next night. Have Stanek, if you had any belief in Ryan Stanek. And by the way, best ERA in Astros history in the bullpen. I have a hard time seeing him come back here now. So it's like Garrett Cole leaving when he's done in the ninth inning in the Nationals, and he's walking out of the clubhouse like, hey, you coming back? I got my Boris hat on. I'm just not, and Stanek, Stanek should have been, for example, in a 5-0 game, playing catch behind Montero, let Montero finish, he's in rhythm, say press for the next night. Worked out. But Ryan Presley did something no one else has done in 96 years. In 96 years in baseball is 2000. Like, it's not yesterday.
And the stat was that he was the first pitcher to get 5 outs or more and then come back the next day and make a save. It was some crazy statistic like that.
Yeah, and the last guy that did it was like
It was like, what was his name? Like
I don't know.
Boots McCall or somebody.
But he started the entire game the day before and pitched all 9 innings. He had pitched all 9 innings, and then he had to come back and close the next game out. So it's in an era where they had nothing to do. You just don't do it. Like, it's just not something you do. And it worked out, and Dusty got it worked out. So, it worked. Some of the decisions were questionable, but it worked out. And, I don't know. The bottom line is it was a good postseason for the Astros. We had a lot of fun doing it. They have some questions to answer. They've already lost some players, Will Smith, Trey Mancini. Brantley's a free agent.
But that's by their own accord.
But it doesn't mean you still have to replace him. I mean, Michael Brantley's going to be an interesting one to watch. 5 years old.
Yeah.
Been here, 4 years now? Been here 4 years?
Yeah.
Free agent. You got to figure that he'd want to stay here. I don't see Verlander going anywhere else, but, he could. I think Kate Upton likes it here. She said that her husband's a legend.
She did. She told me that. And then she basically, when I asked her about whether the World Series win in Game 5 mattered and how important, she goes, well, for me, I'm not quite sure well, actually, here's what she said.
I honestly don't know his opinion on that, but for me.
Okay, for you.
Yeah, I'm like, but for me, I'm so happy that he has it, but honestly, he's such a legend. Who cares?
Now, in that clip, you see me laughing at the end. And the reason I'm laughing, Jeremy, is I'm thinking, oh, wow, I guess I'll just have to bleep that out when I send it back to the station. Yeah.
It was live TV.
It was live TV.
For her.
She was teeing it up, man.
Yeah, right.
She was teeing it up.
Yeah.
She knew exactly what she was doing. And she was teeing it up. You could see just that kind of that little, ooh, let me pause here.
Mm-hmm.
Let me deliver this with some authority, some punch.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned and talked about the whole Lance McCullers tipping pitches thing, which somebody on Twitter comes out and says, well, look at the leg kick and the glove placement. And your whole point was that's too much to look at in a delivery. Now, the glove placement, potentially. Yeah.
Sure.
But to think that someone could look down at the leg kick, and then at the glove, and then be ready for the pitch. What else did you say about that? Now, I don't remember what else you were saying.
You don't have enough time to do that and pick up the release point. Like, it's something in the upper half. You talk about the glove placement, like it's right here,
yeah,
here, or tip. You can see stuff like that that's minor. I thought it was more of his tempo.
That was it.
I thought the tempo was so deliberate that it gave guys a chance to see some small differences instead of picking the ball up, getting on the mound, and going forward. And sure enough, in the 3rd and the 4th inning, when his tempo picked up, he cut right through him. Bryce Harper's a student in the game. He's the one that picked up any kind of tell they may have. It was really just about living in the middle of the strike zone with cement mixer sliders and flat fastballs. And anytime you do that, at any level, let alone the big leagues, especially against a team of the Phillies, who's just a bunch of mashers, they're not going to miss that. And they didn't miss it. When Verlander made the mistakes in Game 1, nobody was talking about a tell with Verlander. No one said, oh, yeah, he's tipping. These guys were teeing off on him, too. I mean, they won that one also. So
that's a good point.
We
didn't even bring that up.
Everybody talks about when we get to the postseason, depending on who the pitcher is, oh, he's tipping his pitches. There's only guy that I remember was really tipping his pitches was Tyler Glasnow. That's it. And that was with the Rays here.
2019?
Yeah, he had something with his glove where it was his hand set. Right? And he was the only one that I can remember was actually tipping like that, where guys just teed off. McCullers' tempo was bad. Why would your tempo be bad? Those of you who are watching or listening are going to ask, why would somebody like Lance McCullers' tempo be so bad? I'll tell you why, because he can't feel the ball. That's why. So if he can't feel the ball, he's going to be concentrating a little bit harder on what that grip is supposed to be like, which that is a tell in itself. So we weren't up here in the box with Harper. We were just, he could have been digging for all we know. You know what I mean? But it's only brought on because he shouldn't have been pitching in that situation because it wasn't his optimal position. It's time to do it. He should have been throwing in Houston, where it's controlled, where the weather is fine, where the roof is closed, unless you're Aaron Boone. Right? Should have been doing it here. He didn't do that. They used him there, and, it bombs away.
The direct quote you had after the game to me on KHOU 11 Plus. Quote, every time something happens with a pitcher in this type of environment, i.e. postseason, World Series, we're looking for a reason beside the fact that he just didn't execute. What Lance McCullers did have was a tempo problem. That was your exact quote, which I'm seeing right there.
That was it.
Yeah. And then let's now fast forward to game 6. Zach Wheeler is pitching well. I don't want to say he was cruising, but I mean, he had his finger on the cruise control, ready to set the speed and everything, and runs into some issues in the 6th. And here comes Rob Thompson to take him out and bring in Alvarado. And you said to me, this is not going to end up well for the Phillies. And I tweeted that out. And sure enough, Alvarado comes up, serves one up to Jordan, who then hits a ball that one baseball person told you that knows Houston very well. He's never seen anyone hit a ball over the batter's eye in Houston, whether it's a game or batting practice. And that's what Jordan Alvarez did in game 6. We had been crunching the numbers going through that. And I said, Jeremy, Alvarado actually does worse against left-handed hitters. And Jordan Alvarez has a higher batting average and some other metrics against left-handed pitchers. And Rob Thompson, he still defended the decision after the game. And it's this common theme that we hear a lot of times, is that sometimes a good process leads to bad results. And that was basically the message that Rob Thompson had after the game. And Zach Wheeler, he also said, I was surprised I got taken out. I only had 70 pitches. And you had mentioned the stuff. I mean, yes, he had guys on first and third, but the stuff was a big thing for you.
He's throwing 98 miles an hour. I mean, it's fastballs. And that inning.
And sawing guys off.
Yeah, it wasn't a decrease. I mean, he blew up Jose Altuve's bat. He then turns around and Jeremy Payne gets a base hit the middle, but it's not a line drive. It's a ground ball.
You thought it was almost like a seeing eye single.
Yeah, seeing eye single takes a hop. I mean, those got to count to hit 300 and have a good year. But, that was not it wasn't like we were talking about Rockets, And Rob Thompson couldn't wait to get out of the dugout. He was on the top step before the ball hit center field, And he did it so quickly that even Alvarado wasn't ready.
You think?
Yeah, because he took forever to get out of the bullpen. Relievers, if they know they're going in the game in certain situations, they're ready to go by that situation. If they don't get in, they're usually doing like this. It's my time. What do you mean? I'm not going in, right? And so the guy wasn't going in. Alvarado wasn't going in, and then he's turned around and he's facing Pedro Alvarez, Jordan Alvarez.
Pedro, now that would have been amazing to see Pedro Alvarez, the former Vanderbilt guy, come out and grab a uniform.
I don't think Pedro would have done that, but
no.
Jordan goes up, up top, big ship. So, ball game right there. As soon as he did, I looked at you. I said, "It's over." Yeah,
and I said, who are they going to have? So the big question was with Fromber, how long does he go? And I said, well, who do you think the Astros should?
6 before the game.
Yes, and who should the Astros turn to these next few innings? And your response was,
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's over. It doesn't matter. I think they went Neris, Abreu, Presley. Good night. It doesn't matter. I mean, you get to that situation there, and you just deliver such a knockout blow. And if you're on the other side, if people talk about momentum, it's confidence. If you're the Phillies and you realize that your manager just made that type of decision, everybody in the ballpark knows it's not the right move. Wheeler knew it wasn't the right move. Alvarado knew it wasn't the right move.
Well, I don't know if Alvarado knew.
You can tell by the conviction in his pitches. He
was throwing 98 to 101.
He was late, missing in the middle of the zone, making mistakes. I mean, Wheeler was looking at Thompson.
Threw under the backstop, I think.
Wheeler was looking at Thompson on the dugout like, for real? Like, it wasn't the time to do it. And analytically, we can talk about third time through the lineup, but I have no doubt that's what it was.
Of course it was.
Besides that, like the fact that Alvarado is not as good as you pointed out against left-hand hitters as he is right, and Jordan Alvarez hits left-handers better than he hits right-handers. And we're going to go get him. Why? You couldn't get him one more hitter? You're that scared? If he was Altuve was at third base, right? That's what happened was the broken battle. Altuve beat the double play. So you had first and third, and you're going to go get Alvarado to pitch against Alvarez in a matchup that favors the Astros. Why? Wheeler gets another ground ball. He just had 2 ground balls. It's another ground ball. Inning's over, in theory. In theory. Better to keep the ball in the ballpark in that situation with 1 run and make it 2-1 instead of 4. Or does my math not work out? So, Rob Thompson's been a good manager for a long time.
Whoa. What do you mean he's been a good manager for a long time? Okay, I was going to say, geez.
He did a good job with the Phillies. He's been a good baseball man for a long time. He should know better than that.
He said, how much pause? The question was, how much pause did that give you in that situation, if at all, going to Alvarado? Yeah, it did. It was a tough decision. I guess he just admitted right there. But I went with Alvarado, he beat him. He got behind Alvarez and 99-mile-an-hour fastball. He just beat him to the spot. That's what good hitters do.
Yeah, he was out of the dugout so fast, Jason. I don't think that's an accurate statement.
It's kind of a dirty inning, and I thought, I'm going into the series. It was always kind of Alvarado on Alvarez. It was the 6th inning, and I felt like the normal back end of the bullpen guys could get through it. I thought Wheels still had really good stuff. It wasn't about that. It was just I thought the matchup was better with Alvarado on Alvarez at the time. Zach just said in the clubhouse that he was surprised that you decided to do that. Any reaction? Questions and answers courtesy of ASAP Sports, the transcripts. Rob Thompson, I'm sure he was. Yeah, I'm sure he was. He still had his good stuff. I just thought that was a key moment in the game, and that was a momentum swing that I thought Alvarado had a chance to strike him out.
So by Alvarado, did he mean Alvarez? Because it was a momentum swing. It was a World Series swing. You don't get all these shots at World Series to keep making these type of moves. If Wheeler was at 100 pitches, I'd get it. 70 pitches, same stuff was the same.
I got to believe that Alvarez had a rough first couple of at-bats against Wheeler. Like, I don't have my box score in front of me, but I vaguely remember, I tweeted out that Alvarez was 2 for 21 in the World Series. He was 2 for 19 coming into that game, which was the exact same numbers that he had in the 2021 World Series against the Braves. He was 2 for 19 in that series, and then he was 0 for 2.
Can't help you. I know that it was a bad move. It was the wrong move when he did it, the entire ballpark. Anybody who's watching the game that wasn't him, that was the wrong move. Anybody, and, if the analyst up there says that was the right move, how many times do you guys see that work out the other way? It's not June. You don't have another opportunity. It's not June. It's the anti-Dusty Baker who went to the same guys too many times.
Yeah.
This is something where, and had him backwards in the wrong situations at points. This is something where the guy had no business taking that hitter.
But it's also like Game 5 with the Astros, Justin Verlander. Dusty left him in to face Nick Castellanos, 3rd time up, and Dusty felt JV is. I trust him. He's going to do it, and he did. And that was a tough spot that he was in Game 5.
Yeah, but the manager has the ability to make the decision. That doesn't mean it's the right one.
Yeah.
So look. Bottom line, World Series over.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it?
It'd be different if we said it after the fact.
Yeah.
We said it when it happened.
Oh, before it happened.
Yeah. So there's none of this, armchair quarterback stuff. Right there in that moment, you leaving Wheeler in, and you have a chance to get to Game 7. You don't, and you're home. So.
And this was after, now that I'm looking at the box score, bottom of the 5th, Game 5, Bryce Harper doubles to right field. So you've got a man on, right?
Altuve,
and then Justin Verlander gets Nick Castellanos on a fly ball to end the inning and then secure his first World Series win.
Right.
So.
I don't know, man. I'll be honest with you.
And the score was 2-1 Astros. So
at the
time, so Castellanos was the potential go ahead run.
Well, I'll be honest with you. As far as Game 7's concerned, I wasn't upset it wasn't played, man. I need a day off.
Yeah, and I don't think the Astros were too upset either, because Alex Bregman broke his finger. He does not need surgery. Jose Altuve, according to ESPN, had a hamstring issue, and he might not have been able to play. Martin Maldonado's been dealing with a hernia.
So he might have been out.
I think he still would have played. I think he still would have played.
They all would have played.
Bregman?
Oh. It'd be fine.
Bregman, I guess, was quoted saying that, you would have been out. Me and Jose wouldn't have been able to play.
Interesting. You'll see.
And then who would have started? Oh.
Yeah, no, it worked out in Game 6. They didn't say anything in Game 6. They got through it. So
yeah.
Anyway, rolling into the off season with some holes to fill, not many.
Yeah.
Got some need to do some long-term extensions with, I would say, Pena's earned some money.
Yeah.
I would say
Tucker
needs to get done. They got Alvarez done.
Yep.
Right? They've got Bregman and Altuve for 2 more years.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to work on Verlander, Michael Brantley. So there's some things they got to do, which is all the more reason to have a GM in place that's going to do it or to have him out. And I would bet that was the crux of the 1-year deal.
Well, I would think that Verlander was the one. My guess is Jim Crane was the one who got the Verlander deal.
Yeah, he's working on that one right now. They have till 4:00 tomorrow.
Michael Brantley, shoulders are a weird thing. Shoulders sometimes can zap your power. Not to say that Michael Brantley's a huge power hitter, but
he has some.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's interesting offseason. If they can keep this thing going, let the kids continue to develop the ones that are here, because there's not much else behind it. Window stays open.
And then catcher.
Yeah, Christian Vasquez should be their guy.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Corey Lee is.
Yeah,
he's not. He should not be their guy.
He's likely not the answer.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's going to end this edition of the Extra Bases podcast in our new fancy Zoom room podcast room, which we're still figuring out. Basically, Jeremy should be on that other side and I'll be on this side, and we're going to use this other little camera at some point as soon as I get it to connect to the Wi-Fi. But the fact that you were here, I figured we should just do this.
Yeah.
Now I've got to figure out how to get the recording from this computer to my computer.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I'm out of town, so I'll leave that to you.
You're saying hopefully by the time you come back, yeah, I'll have it figured out. All right. Well, for Jeremy, I'm Jason. And once again, thanks for listening to the Extra Bases podcast. And please leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And we'll always do whatever we can to make this a better experience for Jeremy. All right, everybody. we'll see you next time.